Hello, everybody. It is great to have you here with me today. I look forward to discussing some important items with you. So again, thanks for your time. And we're grateful that you're taking advantage of your Employee Assistance Program benefit. At Blomquist Hill, we're really excited to be partnering with your organization to help with your challenges. We live in difficult times, and there are many challenges that we face every day, and many opportunities that come with that. And opportunity for us is to help you through these challenges and help you kind of find your way through them. And so we think it speaks highly of you that you're here and of your organization for being serious about finding tools and providing ways for you to get the assistance you need to help you through some of these challenges. We love to talk about many topics with you. We've had fun sharing many of these webinars throughout this recent time. We've had 2 or 3 times a week. We've been doing them at times. So we're really excited to provide another seminar. And today's topic is going to be on sensitivity training, as you can see by your screen. We're going to talk about celebrating diversity and making sure that everyone feels included. That's critical for a great working environment. No one wants to go to work feeling like they're going to be left out, that they're going to be mistreated, certainly. And I don't think it feels good to be on the other end of that either, to feel at the end of the day like others are, because of your words and actions, are feeling not included or feeling mistreated. So I know that can be a difficult thing for us to all navigate and do, and we make mistakes. And so this training isn't designed to say that we're all perfect. It's the ways that we can become more aware of the ways we can improve, and then how we can address challenges when they come. So as we go through this today, and make sure that the slideshow is activated here. We got you started. So, why do this, right? Why have a sensitivity training, I guess would be our question we'd ask ourselves. Why do this? Well, we've already kind of said that it's just to help us have a better work environment, and perhaps even our personal lives, to just have better relationships. It really starts with raising awareness, right? We may be acting or in ways that we're not even aware of how they create, and maybe nothing is meant by that. Or maybe we do have beliefs and feelings and a culture that we're not aware of how that's affected us and how our beliefs have been affected by that. So we kind of want to make sure that we're raising our awareness and of how other people think and feel, right? This isn't just about, hey, this is how I feel, so I'm just going to act however I want to. But we need to know how our behaviors and how our beliefs influence other people and their feelings. I want to create an understanding and improve communication so that we can come together and work on a dialogue that helps us to feel like we're mutually benefiting and we feel great about our relationships. So it's nothing more than just knowledge on how to work together and help everyone in your workplace, no matter who they are. So we have a lot of issues that we want to address. Right now, there's a lot of racial tension, and I think no matter when you watch this, you could say that's true. We've had racial tension through the history of maybe time and through our country, and that's come to a boil. We're having a lot of challenges with that, and that probably comes currently at the issues we're having with sensitivity around that develops as this pandemic has developed. Everyone's kind of been cooped up, and that's created a lot of attention and frustration, and people are not at their best sometimes. And so we have heightened sensitivities anyway. And you add to that all these world events that we all see through social media, through just our own experiences, and those all kind of come together and create a tipping point where we just have a lot of tension that happens around us. We have issues with people with immigration, life expectancy and retirement, issues around women in the workplace, gender-related issues, issues around just diversity. Our workplace is more diverse than ever, and so that means that this training and coming together is more important than ever. So here are some important classes to consider, of kind of categories of some of the areas and issues, but it's not totally inclusive. There may be some things that I think is going to be sensitive to all kinds of things that aren't necessarily under these groups. But here are some that we know of: race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, your national origin, age, disability, and citizenship are just some examples of some of the official classes that are protected, but also many others that you could consider we need to be sensitive to. You know, I give you an example at work, depending on where you live, maybe your favorite football team or something like that can cause sensitive issues, and not to, you know, obviously that's nothing as typically as loaded as other things. If it creates a big conflict at work, it's something you need to be sensitive to, as anything that creates a conflict at work or feelings of difference. I think what we need to kind of build on is that we're all different. And if anyone's looking for a world where everyone's the same and that's your comfort level, you're always going to be disappointed, and you're always going to have feelings about that, and you're always going to feel unhappy, and you're missing out, right? The differences between people can seem endless. It can seem like there's so many differences, and we all know that experience. So we are all different, and I think part of our well-being in our life, our happiness, comes from accepting that, and maybe even embracing that, right? And valuing those differences. I know it makes for a lot more interesting experiences in life. That's why many of us love to travel. I loved our anniversary trip over to Europe. I'd never been there before, and we got to go to Portugal and Spain, and experiencing a different culture and trying to understand people, where I was used to most of my life being where people spoke my language, but going where I became the one that was not understanding everybody else was an interesting experience for me. So understanding differences, different cultures, and different backgrounds can be a really enjoyable experience if we allow for it. If we can feel confident in ourselves enough to embrace other people and their ways of life, I think we can be enriched by that. So even if you find yourself knowledgeable about someone's culture, don't assume you know that person. You know, their experience of that culture, their religion, what it means to be a man or a woman, what it means to be a black or white or of any background. So we can't just assume, you know, because that's what stereotyping is when you think you know somebody based on just something that you see in them. And then when you stereotype, that's when we cause problems. So it's good to know cultures and backgrounds, but when we start to assume we know people based on those things, then that's where we cause problems. It's when we become sensitive to the differences between us, and sensitive in a positive way. Sensitive can have a negative connotation, but it doesn't need to be. Sensitive is a good way to create kind of commonality and a feeling of safety and inclusion. It just means being aware. It doesn't mean you're walking on eggshells, but it's being aware. And the other thing I want to highlight is that we're also all the same, right? We could spend a lot of time on this diversity training and sensitivity and really focus on what makes us different. And that's important to look at. But we're also helps to know that we have much more in common than we probably have different between us. And I think that helps people come together to realize, you know, we all want the same things. We all want, we can always find something in common. And I think that helps people kind of get along better when you can find those things. And we all want the same things. We want safety, love, freedom, and a happy life. The American dream is what we all want, is that pursuit of happiness. And so seeing that in each other is very helpful. It always helps me to look for those things that we have in common as well. And we all want to be accepted for our differences. And so you want to be accepted for the things that are unique about you, and we all have them in some way or another. We all have probably something that might make us feel different than the group around us, and we all want to feel like that's okay. So recognize your own feelings. That's a key part of this. We find that when there are real challenges, and when we have this tension that doesn't seem to go away, it's when we're not even self-aware really of our own feelings, beliefs, and values. Sometimes they're so ingrained in us that we don't know where they come from, and we just assume it to be common understanding. The bottom line is all boils down to having understanding and respect. And the important thing about being in the workplace is that it's really not an option, all right? We need to. It's important for your organization to feel like everyone is safe. Your views on people. So most people see themselves as open-minded, non-judgmental, and or fair. So it's interesting if you look at the research on asking people, do you feel like you have bias? They would say no. But if you ask people, do you feel like other people have bias towards you? At a higher rate, they say yes. So something's got to give, right? Something's not quite right. And it could be just a lot of misunderstanding. We know that's part of it too. But also comes from sometimes not even being aware of our own judgments, the way we look at somebody. We maybe even realize that that comes through, or that we're even aware of our own biases or the ways that we see things. So it's normal to feel more comfortable with people who share your feelings, beliefs, and values. Like, I don't think that makes us bad that you might feel more comfortable around somebody who you have all those things in common with. And I don't think that makes a bad person or anything that you value that. But it's good that we are aware of that, but also then that we push ourselves and say, you know what, I can find comfort level. I can create comfort levels with people that are different than me by beginning more acquainted with their background and becoming more comfortable with it. So, the way we were raised, our religion, our upbringing, our education, our environment, the people around you, your friends, all of these things have played a big role throughout your life. We're really the product of all the information and the things that we've been given throughout our life. And so it takes sometimes looking at that and seeing how those things have come together to shape us before we can really start to change some of them. Okay, so they produce what they do in the end. That learning, that environment produces our words, our behaviors, and the ways that we think, and how we treat other people. So it's in recognizing that's the first thing we got to do, right? Is just take a hard look at ourselves and ask ourselves, why do I have these beliefs, and what do they mean, and where do they come from? And then you got to look at how you're acting, right? How does that come through? It's sometimes really humbling to see how our behavior doesn't always align with what we think we know about ourselves. So if you were judged by just your behavior, then you might have to sometimes look at that and say, wow, that sends a different message than I think I believe about myself. So the types of behavior we want to look at too, in just a little more detail, are their tone, right? That's a behavior. If I say to someone, I love you, but I say it in a really, I love you, then it doesn't have the same message as if I say it with conviction and deeper meaning. We have lots of examples of that, right? I'm sorry is a great one, right? I'm sorry can be said, I'm sorry. And that sure doesn't sound like you're sorry. It sounds like you're just kind of being sarcastic. So the tone matters, our word choice does matter, and our body language and interpersonal decisions. And so we want to take a look at each of those. First, tone. We look at that first because in a lot of ways that conveys the most, right? We know from research on communication that your tone, which is your kind of your tone of voice, your body language, you combine all of that, it really makes up a big part of what you communicate. So sarcasm, do you come across as curious, humorous, sympathetic, neutral, impatient? Those are some examples. Tired, patronizing, casual, or informal. So paying attention to your tone. It's kind of an interesting exercise to record yourself, video especially, if you can see yourself as well, and see how you come across to people. So you can't, sometimes people say in technicality, oh, I was very nice to so-and-so. But the way you kind of looked at them and distanced yourself from them. Many of the examples I've heard of people feeling mistreated started with the way that someone looked at them. It's the way that you were seen as you walk down, as you feel like you're the only black person in a room full of white people. And it's the way that somebody looked at you as you came in the door can say a lot. And maybe you think, oh, I didn't say anything, I'm not racist. But sometimes the way you say, you just carry yourself, it says something. I think we have to really look at those things. The next category or area that we want to look at in terms of our nonverbal communication is, well, actually this is getting into the verbal communication, is the choice of words that we use, right? They matter. And it may mean nothing to you, and you might think it's just meant to be casual, and maybe it worked in a circle of people. Maybe you call each other guys and girls and boys, and that works. But for other people, maybe that can diminish their age. If you call a coworker a girl rather than a woman, or a boy instead of a man, These can be loaded words, right? And for people who, I've heard the example of somebody who was in a same-sex marriage and introduced their partner as their wife. It was two women. Introduced her partner as her wife, and the person talking back to them said, "Oh, it's thanks for introducing me to your partner." Referred to the person as their partner when this person had introduced them as their wife, and felt like that was in some way not acknowledging the relationship they had. So that comes to the last point here, which is like, let's use the terms that other people are comfortable with. Then our example it's on there is African American. Um, that may be a very appropriate term for somebody who identifies that that's their heritage, right? But not all Black people identify as African American. So um, Black tends to be more safe in that regard, so using that term. But if somebody embraces and actually prefers that term African American, that ought to be what we use, right? So understanding and seeing, getting to know people and kind of what terms they use and how they identify is critical. That seems to be the theme is we're learning, I think, from all these experiences is how do people see themselves? And then we can reflect on that. And I think we all want to feel like people reflect back the way we see ourselves and let me choose how I identify. So, again, of course, it goes without being said, maybe, but sometimes, unfortunately, it has to be said that using slang and curse words, you may be very comfortable with that language, but other people aren't. And so, if you're in your circles that your private life, they're fine with that. That's your choice. But at work, we need to have a common communication environment where people feel safe and so avoiding that kind of language. Body language is a piece of this, right? Um, we talked about the tone, but the staring, sometimes just in looking at people, it makes people uncomfortable, like you're singling them out somehow. On the other hand, not making eye contact, on the other extreme, and avoiding eye contact can also make people feel like you're being weird or you're not acknowledging them. Rolling your eyes, tapping your fingers, hugging can be a good thing in your personal circles of people you're comfortable with it, but for other people that may be really off-putting, especially in a work environment. We're like, oh, why are you hugging me here? So we gotta be careful with touch, right, and how we express ourselves that way. Especially right now, you're not hugging anybody, you're not even shaking hands because of you're really going to hurt somebody's feelings if you hug now, because that's just a no-no with the virus, right? Laughing isn't an interesting thing. Laughing seems pretty harmless until it's done at the wrong time, right? And it's inappropriate that way. So even something like laughing, you got to pay attention to. Of course, inappropriate touch and how you define that, right? There's all kinds of ways to look at that, but our self-awareness and reading the situation, we know when it's right and wrong if we pay close attention. But if in doubt, take it, be safe with it. Smiling, even things like smiling and when to do that, and shrugging obviously can be off-putting. So, okay, so the next thing you want to talk about here is our interpersonal decisions. And that's kind of an interesting term, right? What are decisions we make and how we include other people or exclude them. So something like getting all the guys together after work might feel really kind of just excluding for the 2 or 3 females who work with us and feel like, oh, thanks a lot for not including us. So encouraging only certain people to apply for opportunities, obviously, is another example. Not using someone's title, especially if you use it for somebody else, right? If I have, I don't know, if I worked in a setting where people had their PhD, I called someone Dr. So-and-so and called the other guy just Phil, that can be a little bit off-putting and make you feel like they're being singled out as not giving them the respect and that earned title that they've been given. So be careful with that. You may be in an environment where everyone's got a PhD, but we all call each other by the first name. If that works your environment, then great. But just kind of using that same kind of consideration for each other. So rules for behavior in the workplace, we want to be flexible, right? Be flexible whenever possible. So there is a side to this where we want to also watch ourselves and how we take offense. And that's what part of being flexible is too. And I don't mean that to say, just sit down and take it and let people mistreat you. That's not at all what that means, but also looking for an understanding where people are coming from and what they intend and looking for that and being flexible to other people's ways of doing things. Acknowledging our coworkers, either verbally or non-verbally, um, again, including and not just kind of setting up cliques or groups. Obviously, some groups are very appropriate for work. It's a team of people. It's a department. Just because the IT group goes out for lunch, I don't know is necessarily excluding everybody unless your work environment said you got not to do that. But typically, naturally occurring groups make sense, right? You don't have to include the whole company every time we have a work party, but make sure they kind of fit. We don't want to have everyone in IT except for one or two people. Using, professional language. We talked about avoiding slang, especially curse type words. And when we do disagree, which is going to happen, using that professionally. We all know how to do this typically. We just sometimes don't bring our best skills to the table. And acknowledging other people's perspectives, allowing for there to be difference of opinions. So diversity training and sensitive training does not necessarily mean you're going to agree with everybody and every opinion, that you've embraced every opinion out there. You've heard, listened to, and respected, and allow for there to be differences. And then, of course, not interrupting. Interrupting is a great way if you're looking to escalate the problem and create more conflict, then go ahead and interrupt. But it's not a good idea. Speak with a moderate tone. Again, that comes back to the tone we talked about, and your volume does a lot to either reduce the tension or escalate it. More things to avoid. We want to be careful to avoid is, again, we talked about kind of slang a couple of times, but referring to employees of different races or religions as using slang. Use the terms that they embrace, right? No matter what you were raised with and what you think is acceptable for another race or religion or sexual orientation or someone's gender identity or something, you ought to use the terms that make them comfortable. That's how we get along. Telling jokes or making comments of focus. In general, just stay clear of those hot topics, right? Those things that are sensitive areas. Speculating about an employee's mental condition. We haven't talked as much about that, but mental health is one of those areas, key areas. We talked about a disability in a general term, but someone's suffering with depression or anxiety or has a learning disorder or something. Recognizing that's also something we need to be sensitive to, and speculating about that is something we want to be very careful to avoid. So asking for their story and checking in with them. What probably predates this is a relationship of trust, right? If you ask for their story, but they don't feel like they have that trust with you, then you might not get that. So we got to really back up and think about what kind of relationship you build with people. Do they feel that you will be open to and listen to their story? The M stands for mirroring. Okay, so that's kind of a way of saying I'm sensing you're hurt, frustrated, or sad. Sometimes you have to kind of pull it out a little bit that way. Encourage them to talk about it by sharing why you're bringing it up. I'm sensing something here. Paraphrasing, validate what you heard and restating it, making sure you got it right. You might ask for their story and you've hit a couple of key areas, and maybe for you it had a certain meaning, and you just run with it and you assume you know what's going on, when for them that isn't even close to what their intended message is. Or maybe they just didn't share it in a way that was super effective. We all make mistakes in how we communicate. So paraphrasing is a great recovery opportunity to make sure we're really paired up in what we're thinking and feeling before we just roll forward assuming we all get what's going on here. I've seen that work so well in just avoiding escalation and making sure on the same page by paraphrasing, making sure we're validating and hearing what correctly. The next piece is for when you feel like, they're not really sharing up and sharing with you, but you really can get a good feel that there's something there priming a little bit. And again, this is something you want to do probably privately, right? You wouldn't want to kind of do this in front of a bunch of people, but as best guess, some people may be afraid to come forward, and it's okay to ask, do you feel, I heard that comment and I wondered how you feel about that, and can you tell me what that meant to you? I'd love to hear your feelings about that. Sometimes and often we're on that end of feeling mistreated, hurt, offended. Something really kind of got to us, right? Someone used a term I don't like. Somebody just acted in a way, there was something about the situation that just didn't feel good. And it leaves me unsettled, right? Here's some things to think about and how we handle that. First is to really, remember we said, accept your own feelings and acknowledge them. Like if you're hurt, even if you feel like you're not sure why and if it's appropriate for you to feel hurt, like allow for it. Like it's own your feelings. It's okay. Acknowledge that, and then from that space, you can be open to, what was shared and what was intended, and what was going on there, right? Instead of just jumping to conclusions that person's, homophobic or racist or whatever it might be, like be open to like where are they coming from? I need to kind of understand a little bit better. Um, so gather your best resources, okay, and your best emotional place. And then where safe. Again, you have to make a determination here. Maybe there's something that was severe enough that you feel like it's just not safe to approach that person. It's pretty hostile. And if that's the case, you have a structure within the company that's there to help you. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. But where possible, it's always great if we can just handle this right between us, especially if you feel like this was a mistake of just misunderstanding or not ignorance, or not really being aware of how something comes across, and so approach that person who made the comment and share in a way that allows for reconciliation. Like, hey, the other day when you were talking about my background, you referred to me as African American, and I just want you to know that I'm not. That's not how I kind of see myself. My heritage isn't from Africa, and so I don't really see myself that way. So, in the future, I just refer to me as Black. I appreciate that. Is that okay with you? And hopefully the response will be, oh yeah, yeah. If that makes you feel better, I appreciate that. I was just trying to be what I thought was the right way to refer to you. So, that hopefully can clear itself up, and we can do that. If you wait and wait and you hear it over and over again, it starts to build. That gets harder to do because we built up a lot of feelings. But I know it can be difficult. I don't want to make it sound like that was really easy what I just said, because you may have had a lot of experiences in your life where that didn't go very well, or you didn't want to come across as hypersensitive or something. And so I recognize the challenges of that. So that's why I say, you kind of have to really access your personal resources and maybe the resources around you to see if you can come to that place. And then we're going to talk further about how you can get the assistance you need if you feel like it comes to that. Just some more advice on how you find a path forward. The ABCs of doing that is to, one, find agreement. Really, I can tell it was really hard for you finding common ground with something. So again, finding agreement where you can, that builds unity. Speaking of building, B is for build. Use and not but. Adds missing information, right? Whenever we say something, it's validating, like, hey, here's something, I know you feel this way, but it's sort of way of saying, I know that that's what you prefer and that's what you think, but here's where I'm coming from. And a kind of sort of way of highlighting that, no, you're wrong, and here's the information. So try using and is a way of saying that's valid, and here's something else I want to add to the story. So developing the story together, validating that, and sharing your story. I think it's what we need more of, is discourse, right? Communication. And I think when it happens between people and face to face, it usually goes well if the two people are willing to have a discussion. Most of the times that I see it gets really ugly is when people aren't willing to even start with that looking for a common ground, or they're doing this over social media and they're already making a lot of assumptions about each other, right? I think if people could sit down a little bit better, we'd have a lot better dialogue in our country. Last is C for compare. Looking at the sides of the story may be different, right? But you can validate each other's sides and listening carefully. So compare and contrast, and be curious and allow yourself to be okay with different opinions. Okay, so we got to be aware that there's some legal liability here, right? Some of you are supervisors, and you're aware that you could be liable for not taking appropriate action. If you just say, hey, my common sense tells me you're being too sensitive, or you went way too far and didn't really kind of look through it carefully, that's what's called guilty acquiescence, right? You're just not doing anything when you're aware of some kind of harassment. So it's important to do something. That's the most common mistake probably leaders make, I think, when it comes to handling problems is to not do anything because they're just afraid of doing it the wrong way, so they don't do anything, which then can become a real problem. And the company can be liable for failing to discover and act. So that's called strict liability. Um, Handling complaints, right? So when employees have a concern, and it's important to note, the employees are not required to go through the lines of authority. It's always great when you can, and it makes probably for the most congenial approach, right? When possible. I'd always say, if possible, start with the person who offended you. And if you can work it out with them, isn't that the best possible outcome, right? Nobody else had to get involved, no disciplinary action. It didn't raise the stakes of what's going on. Always the best whenever possible. So always evaluate your feelings of safety about that, and willingness to try that. But that is not your only option, right? You don't always have to go through your direct supervisor. It's great, again, if possible, to go through your direct supervisor. That's the line of authority, right? But if there's some reason, maybe they're the one that's offended you, or you're not sure that you had a good history of being heard or understood, you have, protections, and you can go straight to human resources, or straight to the boss, the ultimate CEO, or whoever it might be. You have options, right? You don't need to feel like that's the only place you can go. And if you were the one receiving a complaint, what you want to do is avoid putting on the solution hat right away, right? I mean, that's sometimes the temptation is to jump in and fix it. Just hold your horses, just obtain information. And because that right there is validating, right? Just let people share their stories, let them talk and validate their feelings about it. You can validate feelings without taking legal responsibility or taking sides yet until you know what's going on. So obtain information, and then go to your human resources. Human resource leaders are getting special training because that's what they know how to do, right? Or senior management, if your organization is structured that way, for assistance. But every organization has people who are gaining the training on how to handle these situations, okay? Obviously, you don't want to go to the person who's implicated in the claim. That's uncomfortable. Unless you, like I said earlier, unless you feel like you can directly work with them before it comes to that level. Okay, all claims will be taken seriously and investigated and acted upon quickly and with discretion. So you don't want to delay, because the more you delay, the more these problems will continue, right? Putting somebody back to work in an unhealthy work environment for them adds more risk and just harm to that person. And so taking them seriously, investigating, and acting with discretion and being prudent is important. In conclusion, right, as we kind of finish up this, just because you disagree doesn't mean your behavior should reflect your feelings or actions, right? We're all different and we're all the same. It's important to keep that in mind. And we're not done. We're not done cooking when it comes to improving ourselves as people. We want to keep developing skills and strategies as an organization. Maybe more meetings and discussions need to happen to make sure that you're creating a culture, an environment where people feel like it's safe to work there. And when they don't feel like it's safe to work there, they feel like it's safe to talk to someone about it and have those things taken seriously. That's really what it comes down to. That's how we create positive work environments, a great culture of inclusion, and people feeling like that differences are celebrated instead of something that you have to kind of try to hide or run from. Martin Luther King's dream and many others who fought for us to all have better equality and better relations is something that we can all keep alive and keep working on. I think we all have to take an honest look at ourselves and decide, what's my part in that? What can I do to make sure I'm a part of the solution and not part of the ongoing problem? So you being here and hopefully having the open mind and open spirit to what we're talking about is an important part of you being a part of the solution for your organization. So I'd encourage you to kind of take this and kind of reflect on it a little bit further and take a look at your own background and history with this, and be open to seeing where maybe you've had some challenges where none of us, if you feel like you've got this all down and you're perfect, then then you're part of the problem, because none of us are perfect and we all have challenges and we need to keep looking at those. So thank you. We're here for you as an organization, as your employee assistance program, to be part of those solutions for you. If you personally feel like, God, I just need to talk to somebody, right? I need to work through how I feel, and I'm scared of how I'm going to do this at work, or how am I going to handle my feelings. We can sit down with you. Let's talk about it. Let's be a part of you moving forward and getting these things resolved in your life. So don't hesitate to give us a call and let us be a part of that solution for you. And I wish you all the best, and take care.